The river ran wild that summer, swollen by distant storms and melting mountain snow. Its surface glimmered under the ruthless sun, the current twisting like a living thing. On its banks stood a gathering of Apache warriors, their faces hard as stone. In the middle of them, a woman sat bound in a crude wooden chair, her legs useless, her dark hair tangled by wind. Her eyes, once fierce, were filled with quiet resignation. The tribe's shaman muttered words to the spirits, saying she had brought shame, that her weakness was a curse upon their people. No one dared to look at her too long. The woman's name was Ayanna. Once she had been a skilled healer, known for her kindness and wisdom. But months ago, an accident during a raid had left her paralyzed from the waist down. Unable to ride or fight, she had become, in their eyes, a burden. The elders decided she must return to the river spirits, who would either free her soul or claim her body. She did not protest. She only watched the sky as they carried her chair to the edge of the rushing water. Her lips moved silently, whispering a prayer to whatever god still listened. Far off on the ridge, a lone rider stopped his horse and squinted toward the river. His name was Cole Bennett, a cowboy who'd seen too much death to ignore another's. He'd been traveling the frontier alone, guiding a herd through Apache lands when he caught sight of the strange gathering below. The movement caught his eye, the chair, the woman, the men chanting. Something about it struck deep, stirring that restless sense of justice that never quite left him. He turned his horse down the rocky slope without a second thought. The ceremony ended abruptly when two warriors lifted Ayanna's chair and pushed it into the river. The crowd stood silent as the current seized her, spinning her helplessly downstream. She gasped as cold water hit her face, her arms still bound. The current dragged her under, choking her breath. She thought of her childhood, of the laughter by this same river, of her mother's voice calling her name. Then the water closed over her eyes and the world became darkness and soundless thunder. She had accepted her fate, but fate was not finished with her yet. Cole reached the riverbank just as her body vanished beneath the foam. Without a word, he kicked off his hat, threw aside his coat, and dove in. The water was cold and wild, slamming against him like fists. He fought his way downstream, his eyes scanning the swirling depths for any sign of her. Then through the murk he saw a flash of red cloth. He lunged forward, catching her beneath the arms and pulling hard toward the surface. When their heads broke free, she coughed, gasping, eyes wide in disbelief. "Hold on!" he shouted against the roar of the river. The current tried to tear them apart, but Cole fought it with every ounce of strength he had. His boots hit a submerged log, and with effort, he hauled them both toward the shore. They tumbled into the mud, exhausted, gasping for breath. Ayanna's face was pale, her hair clinging to her cheeks. She stared at him as though he were a spirit himself. "Why?" she whispered. He looked at her with steady eyes. "Because no one deserves to drown alone," he said. His voice was quiet but certain, carrying the weight of a man who had already lost too much. He untied her hands and she winced as circulation returned. The marks on her wrists were deep, angry red lines. He wrapped her in his coat, glancing back upriver. The Apache had scattered, unwilling to face whatever man had defied their sentence. The sun was dropping low now, painting the canyon gold and blood red. Cole knew he couldn't stay here long, not if they came looking. He lifted her carefully into his arms and carried her to his horse. She didn't resist. For the first time in weeks, she felt something unfamiliar: hope. They rode for hours through the canyon, the wind cooling her wet skin. Cole said little, only that he knew a small cabin near the foothills where she could rest. The land shifted from red rock to open plain, the air filled with the smell of rain and dust. When they reached the cabin, he built a fire, wrapped her in a blanket, and gave her water. Ayanna watched him quietly, unsure what to make of this man who risked his life for a stranger. "You are not Apache," she said softly. "No," he replied, "but pain don't care what blood runs in you." Days passed and Ayanna's strength began to return. Though she could not walk, she helped him gather herbs, mend clothes, and cook. The two spoke little at first, but silence between them became its own kind of peace. Cole told her stories of cattle drives and gunfights, of friends long buried under the desert sun. Ayanna spoke of her tribe, her people's songs, and the pain of being cast away. In those quiet nights, the crackling fire and whispering wind seemed to weave their stories together. Two souls scarred by fate, but bound by kindness. One evening, as the sky blazed with twilight, Cole asked if she wished to return to her tribe. She shook her head. They have their spirits, she said, and I have mine. The river took my old life. You gave me a new one. He nodded, understanding more than he said. Out here, every man and woman carried ghosts. It was what they did with them that mattered. Ayana smiled faintly, her eyes reflecting the firelight. Perhaps the river was never meant to end me, she whispered. Perhaps it meant to bring you to me. Cole looked away, his heart heavy and quiet. Weeks turned into months. Her hands grew stronger. She learned to weave baskets and grind herbs again. The cabin, once silent, filled with laughter and the simple rhythm of survival. Yet the world outside never forgot. One morning, Cole spotted riders on the horizon, Apache scouts, their silhouettes sharp against the rising sun. He knew they had come for her. Ayana saw the fear in his eyes and touched his arm. If I must face them, she said, I will not hide. He wanted to fight to protect her, but she shook her head gently. You gave me life, Cowboy. Let me live it with honor. The riders approached slowly, their faces unreadable. The shaman dismounted, staring long at the woman they had condemned. Ayana met his gaze without fear. After a long silence, he spoke to her in their tongue, asking if she cursed them for what they did. She shook her head. No curse, she said, only forgiveness. The old man bowed his head, perhaps shamed, perhaps relieved. Without another word, they turned their horses and rode away into the desert. Cole stood beside her, the wind tugging at his coat. Looks like even the river couldn't wash you away, he said. She smiled, tears bright in her eyes. As evening fell, they sat together on the porch, the sound of the river drifting faintly through the canyon below. The world had changed around them, but for once neither felt alone. The frontier was still wild, still cruel, but it was theirs now, carved out of fate and courage. Ayana looked toward the setting sun and whispered, The spirits wanted me to meet you. Cole smiled beneath his hat, his eyes fixed on the horizon. The wind carried their silence away, and somewhere in the distance the river sang, not of death but of salvation,